Licensing Subcommittee meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live on Council's YouTube channel. My name is Councillor Mercy Ume, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. If I lose connection and cannot reconnect, Councillor Paul Alexander will take over for me. I would like to remind all participants of few housekeeping points. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. Please keep your camera turned on when you speak at the hearing. Please note that the chat function has been disabled. If parties wish to add any additional information other than at the allocated time to speak, they must use the raise hand function so that they're not missed. I also ask that members keep their questions and comments brief to the point. If any councillor leaves the meeting or loses connection during an item, we will pause and wait a few minutes for them to reconnect. If a councillor is not present at the substantial part of discussion of an item, they will not be included in deliberation. The quorum for this meeting is 2 members of committee. If we have fewer than 2 members in attendance, I will have to adjourn the meeting. I now move to item 1 on our agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. We have no apologies for absence. Item 2, declaration of interest. Do members have any declaration of interest?
So we appear to have lost the chair. I'm going to give it another couple of minutes before.
Councillor Alexander, your voice is doing that thing it does sometimes.
Is that better? Thanks.
But also, Councillor Alexander, I think you find Councillor Ume has just rejoined. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happens. Okay, sorry. Item 2, declaration of interest. Do members have any declaration of interest?
No, Chair.
No. Item 3, summons bar 374 North End Road, Southwest 6. I would like to ask every member participating to introduce yourself as I call on you. We will have with us the applicant, Nick Campbell. Nick?
Yes, that's myself, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nick. We have Casey Bryan, that is the head of operation.
Yeah, that's
okay, yeah. Thank you. We have Neil McCann, solicitor.
Yes, good evening, Chair.
Thank you. We have Eliza Collin, David Gary, the director and Shield associate. Is David there? Okay, thank you. We have Eliza Collins. Okay, and we have Adrian Ovaltime. Adrian?
Present, okay. Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Then we have Emmanuel, Council Legal Officer.
Present, Chair.
Okay. Local residents objecting, Chris Rankin. Chris, are you here?
I am here.
Okay. We have John Scolding. John?
Hello. Yes,
okay.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Okay, procedure. Before we begin, I can confirm that in addition to the main agenda, a supplementary agenda containing additional information from the applicant and objectors were published and circulated to all parties on the 2nd and 6th of December 2022, respectively. Before we consider the application today, please may I quickly explain the procedure the committee will follow. We hear from the following: the licensing officer will introduce the application, the objectors who has registered to speak, finally, the applicant and his representatives. Usually, each party will address the committee once for a maximum of 5 minutes. Those speaking on behalf of other parties may get more time at my discretion. We will ensure each side has equal time. Following the presentation by all parties, the committee may ask questions of any party or other person present at the hearing. No party has the right to ask questions to any other party at any time during the hearing. Following the presentation and questioning, each party will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to sum up their cases or representation. The committee will then retire for deliberation. Upon its return, I will announce the committee's decision. Please keep your remarks as concise as possible. Licensing officer, can I ask the licensing officer, Elias Collins, to introduce the application?
Yeah. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, panel. By way of background, I can confirm that on the 2nd of September 2022, Simmons Street Light Fulham Limited submitted an application to vary the premise licence in respect of the premises known as Simmons Bar, 374 North End Road, London. The application sought to vary their licence to extend the hours for the sale of alcohol, performance of live music indoors only, performance of recorded music indoors only, performance of anything of a similar description to live music, recorded music or performance of dance indoors only, from Thursday to Saturday until 0100 hours, along with the opening hours, Thursday to Saturday from 800 hours to 1:30 hours. In addition, they sought to add, remove and vary some conditions as outlined in pages 5 to 6 of the report. The licensing section received 5 representations in total, 1 from the Member of Parliament for Chelsea and Fulham and 4 from local residents, objecting to the variation of the licence application during a 28-day consultation period. The applicant has proposed a number of additional steps to promote the 4 licensing objectives if the application is granted. A copy of these proposed conditions can be seen on pages 43 to 44 of the report. In response to the representations, the applicant provided written submissions in support of the application together with a copy of the pre-application advice report, Simmons Bar anti-drinking policy spiking report, Simmons Bar drugs policy and Simmons Bar dispersal policy. The written submissions and policies can be seen on pages 56 to 71. You will note from the report that the applicant has now reached an agreement with the noise and nuisance team. The applicant agreed to add 3 further conditions to a licence if granted. A copy of this correspondence can be seen on pages 45 to 46 of this report. Please note that there have been 2 supplementary agendas issued by the licensing authority in relation to information from objectors and the applicant, located under Supplementary Agenda A and Supplementary Agenda B. I have no further comments at this stage unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Now, can I have the local residents objecting? Well, first from Chris, who is representing Annabelle Cottrell. Chris Rankin.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So Chris, I'm going to allow you 10 minutes.
Okay, I hope I won't need it. So there's a lot of supplementary information being provided and the report of the independent inspection, all the rest of it, to kind of support the application, but it misses the point. The hours requested relate to town centre. So if we look on page 11 of the agenda, town centre hours, Friday to Saturday, 2:30, Monday to Thursday, 1 o'clock. This isn't a town centre. This is at most mixed use. And actually, the reality is, if you walk through the area, it is hugely residential. It actually tips towards residential far more than it is mixed. There are flats either side. There are flats right the way around the square. Every road that goes off North End Road is residential and purely residential. So to ask for hours that a town centre completely misses the point and misses the guidelines that the local authority has placed to protect local residents. It was stated, hang on. So at an application, here we go. At an application for an eatery, food shop on the North End Road, asking for very late hours, I understand that Councillor Ben Coleman made very clear that the local council have no plans to turn North End Road into what is called a nighttime economy. This is a daytime development area, not a nighttime development area. Local residents need to be protected. I am curious about the request for the extension of Thursday hours, because Thursday hours request don't even meet the town centre requirement, which raises the question about what the intention is here. Is this a genuine application for Thursday hours? And in which case, why apply for something that's just not allowed? But also, is it set there so that, you know, it's the thing we can lose in order to gain the thing that we want? It feels like playing games. And actually, this is about protecting local residents. All the stuff that Simmons Bar does and the independent report states is great, is brilliant, but it doesn't control what happens when people leave the bar, when people leave any of the other pubs and bars around. If you walk down the residential roads on any day, you'll find vomit on the pavement. And actually, this is a family area, and children are walking to school dodging this stuff. It's part of the issue of cumulative impact upon the local community that in 5.3 and in 5.4 of the agenda says we're to protect local residents from. If you live in the area, as I do, the reality of living in the area down residential streets, and I live several roads up, is you get woken up. You get woken up by people having sotto voce conversations, which actually are held at the top of their voice because the alcohol has deadened their ability to control the volume level. We have couples having arguments with each other because they've been drinking too much. You can't control that in the bar. And cumulative impact means that by increasing the number of hours, we're increasing the length of time people have to drink, and we're also working into that time that is supposed to be there to protect the residents. Simmons Bar and a number of bars are already open late. Traffic starts to hit at 6 o'clock in the morning. So if we take Simmons Bars at current hours, midnight to 6 a.m., that's the Cinderella hour, in which working people, in which children, in which local residents have time to sleep. This is whatever technical argument this is, this is a residential area, and Simmons Bar and all the pubs are surrounded by flats and surrounded not by families, surrounded by children. And we have a responsibility for looking after those. If we take this step, it's going to be difficult to walk it back. The hours, the rule about the hours here on page 11 is there to protect local residents. It's there to protect residential areas. It's preventative, it's protective. That's what it's there for. We're not a nighttime economy, and we are not a town centre. If we look at item 5.4 and talk about crime, crime is a reality in the area. You see it regularly as you walk down the streets. The little piles of nitrous oxide and those great big cans that are sitting there because they've been used. Now, that's probably not going to have much impact on local residents, but actually it is having an impact on the area and who's being drawn into the area. Because the reality of the situation of any community is what we see is the tip of the iceberg. What we see is what's left over. When we find a needle or nitrous oxide or silver foil in the church grounds, because that's an area that's dark and it's an area where people can get up to no good, that's an area where the toddlers are in next morning. The families are bringing their toddlers in to take them to the nursery. Now, that can happen any time of day, and that can happen any time of the evening. But the reality is, when all the bars and pubs in the area have a similar closing time, that keeps a larger group of people around who are walking by. And that walking by and people being out and everybody moving at the same time is disruptive for crime and drugs and all these things that go on. If we give Simmons Bar a 1:30 kick-out time, they're on their own. But it's not quite on their own, is it? Because they have a very good policy about, if you leave, that's it, you're gone. You can't go out, get some drugs, come back in. But of course, nothing to stop you leaving and going round to the Redback or the reverse. You've been at the Redback, you come and take your drugs, you go into Simmons Bar. And there are other ones as well. You can do quite a useful little circuit and avoid all the rules that are put in place in order to get people to behave themselves. With the pressure on policing at the moment and the reduced policing levels that we've got, the only protection that we have got are the hours that are written by the local authority, and they are there for the protection of local residents. This is a residential area, and we need to protect them. That's it.
Thank you, Chris. Right on your time. Thank you. Can I ask John Scolding to speak on behalf of Ruan Scolding and Charlotte Dexter Morrell? So she has 15 minutes to speak on this. That is John. Is John here?
Thank you very much. Yes, Madam Chair. And first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and also thank you to Chris, who actually has very, very significantly stolen my thunder very nicely. But there are a couple of other points that I'd like to make, and a number of his very good points I'd like to pick up on. Just a little bit of background. I am a resident. I live on Tournay Road. I'm very close to I'm just up the road from the Simmons Bar, and I've lived there for 20 years. And so I have seen firsthand, as a father of 3 children, one of whom is still relatively young, what has happened over the 20 years. And I concur with a lot of what Chris mentions. I should say I've spoken to a lot of residents. I'm not just about this application, but generally about licensing applications. And I've been involved with communications with MPs and other things. So I've come to this with a tiny bit of knowledge, but I've been asked to speak on this occasion, because unfortunately a number of people cannot attend this particular call. Firstly, picking up on Chris's point, disturbances and noise and nuisance. He's absolutely right. This week alone, it's not just litter, it's not just vomiting, it's people urinating in front of our houses, it's sitting on our fences, it's throwing their litter into our gardens. It is very loud voices coming and going. It is a whole array of things which in the early hours of the day wake up our children and wake us up as well. There's no getting away from it. It is a reality. I live on a 100% residential road. I think virtually all the roads off the North End Road are 100% residential. Shorrods, Epirus, Haldane, Tournay, Burnthwaite, Bishops, Hartismere, Halbane, we all know them. This area is intensely residential, and therefore, also the North End Road, whilst it is mixed use, has a very considerable amount of residential properties on the first floors and sometimes above. On crime, sadly, having spoken to a number of applicants, but not this particular applicant, and speaking to the police, one of the things is that there is a huge amount of underreporting of crime, and that's in a sense fully understandable. A lot of applicants want a 5-star rating. They want a quiet life. They want, business in their establishments to go well. But once it leaves their premises, they either don't see it, or if they do see it, they don't report it. And that, I'm afraid, is sadly a recurring theme, one I'm going to come back to when we look at the Shields Associates report and what I want to pick up on. But picking up on Chris's point, the protections in the policy are there to strike the right balance and consider everything. But it must be the case in my submission that in intensely residential areas such as these, there is a clear argument to give heavy consideration to the position of residents, the position of young children, and not just be on one side only, which is something I'm going to come back to. I am also interested, Chris made a very good point about hours and Thursday, because I read through in the pack the temporary event notices, and I looked at the temporary event notices, and this may just be an issue of my complete ignorance of how these things work. But I noticed that there are some temporary event notices for periods in December, starting on Friday the 2nd, then Friday the 9th, and then Friday the 16th. I have in front of me the Simmons Bar UK website. The Simmons Bar Fulham website says that on Thursday they can open until 2 a.m. Now, unless I'm missing a point, and I'm sure the legal representative for Simmons can probably explain it, but I didn't see a temporary event notice that allowed them to open to 2 a.m. And that worried me. It worries me either because I'm ignorant and I've got it wrong, or it worries me because either there is a presumption that this process is but a mere formality and they're going to get what they want. Dare I say, there might be, but I don't know the people concerned, an air of arrogance, or it's a blatant disregard. If it's right that there isn't a temporary event notice for Thursdays, then why does the website say that they're open until 2 o'clock? Anyone can go and look at it. It's forward venues, forward Fulham at simmonsbar.co.uk. I simply mention it because it worries me in that it may tell us something about the applicant that we need to think about if they're pushing very hard without due process. But I also caveat that I'm not an expert in this area, and if there is another process which would allow them to do that, then I will accept that if it's explained to me. I also want to pick up on Chris's point. You know, the North End Road is surrounded by a vast number of roads that are 100% residential. It's on the verge or the edge of Fulham Broadway. I broadly understand that within Hammersmith, certain areas like Fulham Broadway, Hammersmith Broadway, and parts of Shepherd's Bush are regarded more like town centres. But the North End Road, I completely agree, is on the edge of that. And it's a point I will come back to when we're looking at the report. I think it's also fair to say that residents have been very supportive of all the efforts recently from the local authority to rejuvenate the area, improve the local market facilities. There have been consultations which many residents have taken part in, all in support of the daytime economy, all allowing or trying to improve the lot of traders and commercial ventures, I'll loosely say between the hours of 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening, a number of which have been seen the expenditure of considerable amounts of local authority money, and which is part of a plan. And as Chris said, there is no plan to have a nighttime economy on the North End Road. There is no policy to do that, and Councillor Coleman made that clear. I believe it was during the Select Chicken hearing earlier this year, and there is a written record of that. I also think it's significant that Greg Hands, the MP, has, I think on a very rare occasion, made a submission in support of the residents' position. That's partly because we have been having discussions around what Chris referred to, I think, or I'm going to refer to as the domino effect. The creep, if you allow one trade on the North End Road to extend beyond midnight, then everyone will ask for it, and that will radically change the North End Road, and it will radically impact the intensely residential areas that adjoin the North End Road. And the cumulative impact that Chris referred to is something that I think certainly the policy says that the applicant should discuss and take seriously and set out ways in which that impact will be considered and dealt with. And I'm not sure, bar the conditions, that the wider concerns about noise and nuisance and the wider concerns about crime have been addressed in that report. The creep is partly also relevant to the fact that you extend the weekend by including Thursdays. You go from Friday to Thursday. It's a longer period. You'll have later hours, more people around, more drinking, more antisocial behaviour, more issues with them being dispersing around our streets much later at night. And that will increase the risk, significantly increase the risk of residents being woken up after midnight, when, putting it very simply, I think they all have a damn good right to have quiet enjoyment of their property and a good night's sleep. Just turning to the Shields report, if I can put it like that. Again, this is my inexperience. Some of these points may almost not be worth making, but I'm going to make them anyway, just as a matter of form. And there are a number of points in the report where it talks about being independent and undertaking an independent impact assessment. I'm assuming we can all be pretty frank and grown up and be clear that the report isn't independent. They've paid to do it to produce a report that's consistent with their clients' needs and objectives. I'm not saying it isn't sensible. I'm not saying it isn't noteworthy. I'm just saying I don't believe it's independent. And I think we should be aware of that when we're reading the report. As far as I can tell from the report, they spent one day or one night there on the 25th. So as we'll come on to, I'm not sure that's particularly representative, but it may be good enough for these reports. I'm afraid I don't know how much weight or store people will put on them. I've mentioned the domino effect. I've mentioned, I think by that I mean the possibility for the floodgates opening, the possibility that up and down the North End Road, any food alcohol, other related businesses will begin to apply for later hours after midnight, and the cumulative impact on that is, as Chris mentioned, it's pretty bad now, and it will get a lot worse. But specifically in the report at 5.6, actually, I'm going to make a point about paragraph 4. If you look at the premises listed in paragraph 4, the distinction that we're drawing between a town centre and mixed use is very starkly there. If you look at all the North End Road businesses, they do not go beyond midnight. If you look at the Fulham Broadway ones, some of them do. And there is a distinction, and I suspect that distinction and that fact pattern has grown up because the North End Road is so heavily adjoined by 100% residential roads and 100% residential area. I see no reason to depart from that in line with the policy considerations as stated on pages 9 to 11 of the pack. If we then jump, the other points I want to make, I'd like to jump to paragraph 5.6, and they refer to a man called Mr. Brannan, who says there have been no crime issues or any concerns. Now, as someone who's been here 20 years and has lived year in, year out with the crime issues and the increasing drug issues, I'm assuming that the gentleman means is there are no crime issues inside their premises. But I'm assuming they're not saying that there's no crime issues in the area, because that would be, frankly, unbelievable and wrong. But it's not clear from that paragraph, but I'm hoping that Mr. Brannan is not suggesting that there simply are no crime issues by having these types of businesses and these extended hours. The next paragraph I want to pick up on is paragraph 6.3, where the report suggested two conditions. The first to do with search warrants, and the first point I'll make is that, I mean, even though it doesn't say so, quite frankly, this is a comment about knives and worse. One, it ends with a reference about using the wands if required. Well, quite frankly, why should it be at the discretion, and why shouldn't they be used continually? It seems to me that that would be a very sensible condition. And that condition recognises, implies that there is a knife crime issue and a violent weapon issue. And therefore, the statement in 5.6 that says there are no crime issues is quite frankly contradicted by the first bullet point in 6.3. And it seems to me that that's a major weakness in the report. The second condition, which we were, I think, recently told has been accepted on page 7 of the report, is about closing the smoking area and not allowing re-entry after the time to assist with dispersal. Dispersal is a really big issue for the residents, obviously. From what I have seen, the condition which the applicant has agreed to is that the smoking area will be closed no later than midnight. So, we disagree with that on the basis that it's an hour later, and that's something we don't think should happen. But of course, it completely ignores the conditions set out by their own report and didn't agree to not allowing re-entry after this time to assist with dispersal. You know, there is a lot of evidence from the police of people leaving, finding suppliers, meeting people on mopeds. I've witnessed the deals myself, and then returning. That is a very serious issue, and I think again it's a noticeable weakness that they didn't actually adopt the condition as recommended by their own agent. Just looking at the clock, I wonder how much more time. Have I got another 5 minutes, or am I already running near the end? Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, Madam Chair.
3 more minutes you have.
3 more minutes. Okay, absolutely fine. So I've made a point about the conditions, and I've already made the point about the no basis for the nighttime economy here. I would like to just, if I can, jump to a part of the documents on the pack, which I think were actually the responsibility of the legal representative. And in particular, on page 59, there is a section headed Potential Public Nuisance, section 7. And so obviously I'm expecting that because he's on the call tonight, he will speak to these matters directly. But there are 4 points there. So there are no examples given of patrons of the premises currently causing any nuisance. Well, just to be clear, when someone's urinating near my car or throwing up on the pavement outside my house, I don't rush down and go to them, excuse me, can you just tell me which institute you've been drinking at tonight? Okay, so I'm not sure of the value or the meaning of that statement, but I'm grateful that the author of it is on the call and can explain why it's significant. I'm not clear, but it can be. Secondly, the additional considered offers, the statutory authorities are confident that later hours will not cause public nuisance or crime. Now, the crime issue, I'm afraid, is a very significant issue, and I just wanted to read something that police had said at the licensing hearing on the 12th of October 2022 this year, which was written at page 32 of the agenda pack for that. The area of Fulham Broadway and the vicinity suffers from a high level of antisocial behaviour and criminal activity, specifically in the early hours. Now, there are other records of police statements in support of that, and they starkly contradict the point made at the second bullet point in paragraph 7, that there's no correlation between later hours and issues of public nuisance and crime and disorder. And then the last bullet point, and again, I'd be grateful just to understand what this means. There's a comment that it would appear that none of the residential objectors live in the immediate vicinity of the premises. Well, obviously, it'd be useful if the author could tell me what the immediate premises are. Because quite frankly, I'm just up the road.
Why not, please? Because
yeah, okay. Look, that's fine. I've run out of time. I've said my piece. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Apologies if I've overrun.
Thank you, thank you. Now, can I have Nick, Mr. Nick Campbell, or his representative, to give a presentation, and I'm going to allow him 25 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be Niall. Yeah, Neil McCann from Keystone.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Good evening, Chair. I've got one bit of good news for you, and that is that I will not be speaking for 25 minutes, nowhere near. So, as you know, I've got with me Nick and Kelsey, and also Dave Gare, the Director of Shield Associates. And they're here to answer any queries you might have, but I anticipate that I'll be doing most, if not all, of us talking. I'm going to be very brief because it's a relatively straightforward application, if you've heard, to extend the hours on those 3 nights of the week, Thursday, Friday and Saturday. And in turn, we have proffered a number of conditions. Now, there's a myriad of reasons why we say this application should be granted sort. But I thought for brevity, I concentrate on 4 questions and give you 4 answers. So first question is, why are we making this application? Secondly, what are we like as an operator? Thirdly, what consultation has there been with the statutory authorities? And fourthly, and most importantly, how have we addressed the concerns of those that have raised representations? So to deal with the first of these, why are we making this application? Well, it's quite simple. At present, we have some customers on a Thursday, Friday and Saturday but want to stay out a bit later. And we're finding they're not going home, they're not going to the West End, they're going to other venues in the nearby area. Now, in this difficult climate, there's lots of profit from losing clientele from our venue to rival venues is potentially the difference between making a small profit and making a loss. So that's why we're making this application. But what about us as an operator? Well, Chair, no doubt you've heard over the years lots of applicants saying they're fantastic operators. I think every applicant I've ever met thinks they're exceptional. But in this case, we've actually got some evidence to back this up. First of all, we've never had any complaints made to us relating to alcohol-induced disturbance coming from our customers. I'm not saying there's no crime in the nearby area. Of course there's crime in the area. Every part of the country has crime outside. But we haven't had any complaints made to us to do with alcohol-related crime from residents. Secondly, and this has been referred to, we have always used our full extent where permitted of our temporary event notices to go to 2 AM. And we have actually got a temporary notice, temporary event notice in place for this Thursday, and that is covered. So we've been going to 2 AM before, and we haven't received these complaints. None of their representations, and this was cited in my written submissions as well, but none of the representations say there's a particular problem with the operation at present. And I appreciate if there's somebody urinating against your wall at 3 AM in the morning, you don't know what premises they've come from, whether they've come from home or what. But what we can say is that none of the representations cite specific problems with the premises itself. And fourthly, we have got this report of Shield Associates, and it's glowing. Now, I do take issue with the fact we pay them, of course we're paying them, they're not a charity, means they're going to be biased. And the reason I say they're not biased is twofold. One, if they were biased, they would be out of business within months, because they'd be discredited before every licensing subcommittee they go before and every court and judge they go before. If they're not independent, it's not worth having them as experts. And secondly, I've seen reports produced such as this over the years that haven't been very positive, not about Simmons, but other operators. What happens? This is not litigation. There's no duty to disclose evidence. It just gets binned. So reports are produced, but never see the light of day, that are problematic and identify operational issues, but they haven't here. They've identified 2 suggestions, and we have adopted both suggestions. So that's what we say we're like as operators. We say we are exceptional. So how have we gone about this application? How have we consulted with the statutory authorities? Well, Chair, many applicants, and we've seen over the years, we've simply put in an application and then wait to see if representations were received from any of the statutory authorities, and if they were, have dealt with them at that juncture. We didn't do that. We went through a formal paid-for pre-application process, and we had a meeting on site with people from noise control, the licensing authority, and also the police. Their report is at page 61 of a bundle. We're very happy to disclose it. And we adopted all their recommendations, including applying for a 1 AM terminal hour as opposed to a 2 AM. Hence, we have no representations from what I call the independent experts, which are the statutory authorities. And these conditions, further conditions, we agreed with them, subject to the hours being granted, they are significant. We've got an upgraded door supervisor condition, a requirement to have a dispersal policy. We've actually done one. We've not just said, oh, if it's granted, we'll do a dispersal policy. We've done one, and we've appended it to our evidence. We've got upgraded CCTV conditions. We've got several conditions to prevent any noise escape. And we've got greater controls on the use of the outside smoking area. So this leads on to the most important aspect, is what have we done to address the concerns of those who have made written representation? Well, Chair, if you look at page 57 of your committee report, they are my responses to the initial representations made in writing. I'll go through them very quickly. There was a concern about potential spiking of drinks. Well, we provided a copy of our anti-spiking policy. There was concern about illegal re-entry, and we've explained with the door team how illegal re-entry is prevented. There were concerns, and this has come up in quite some detail this evening, that the application was outside of policy, and we are not located within the Fulham town centre. Chair, we are located within a town centre, as defined in your policy, I believe it's at page 11. We have checked that with Christina Perez, or licensing officer. And actual fact, we say we are well within those hours. We haven't applied to 2:30 on a Friday and Saturday, which is the suggested hours for a town centre. We haven't sought to extend our hours during the week, when we could do and still be within the suggested hours. A question mark has been raised over the hours we sought on Thursday. We say that the closing time hour for licensed activities we have applied for is 1 o'clock, and that is within the hours sought. And certainly that's the advice we took from the statutory authorities and also the licensing authority. If, Chair, you're concerned by that half hour on a Thursday and you think we should have last orders at 12:30 and close at 1 o'clock, shut the doors, so be it. But we say in all other respects, the hours are clearly well within the suggested hours for a town centre. And Chair, if you actually want to look at your policy, and I should explain, we can debate amongst us as to whether we think this is a town centre or a residential area or a mixed use. However, your policy has been spent many hours of research was undertaken to develop it, to create a balance between operators and local residents. And you'll see at page 6 of your policy, it refers to the 3 town centres, which are Shepherd's Bush, Hammersmith and Fulham. So we say, from a policy perspective, it is a town centre. There's no debate about that. There's a debate there could be as to whether it should be a town centre, but that is for when the policy gets to be revised. And then the final point we addressed in writing concerned us opening late of another nearby venues. And that's not the case. The Redback is permitted to sell alcohol until 1 AM. It's referred to in many representations, and it has other licensed activity until 2. And also you see Mr. Gare's report, he's also listed all the other premises in the area, and you'll see a number of them have got later hours than we have at the moment. So if this application is granted sought, it's not the case that we will be the latest venue in the area, far from it. Now, following those written representations, I received this morning a supplemental bundle which contained a number of other points. I believe, Chair, you've had a chance to look at that. And what is clear, and again, it's come across today, and I think it's understandable, that the main concerns relate not necessarily to our premises or what happens inside our premises, it's what happens outside our premises, and it's the antisocial behaviour on Fulham Broadway and outside the Redback. Now, management at Simmons, we take a very proactive approach to managing licensing in the local area, and we have until recently been the chair of the licensing pub watch. However, issues such as the illegal resale of alcohol, nitrous oxide sales, etc., they're not ones which Simmons can control, and they go above and beyond the Licensing Act 2003. And indeed, Policy 11 in your own statement references this, and it's included at page 11 of the committee report. And I'll just very quickly quote, it says, licensing law is not the primary mechanism for general control of nuisance and antisocial behaviour caused by people once they are away from a licensed premises and therefore beyond the direct control of a licensee. Now, we'll always look to work with residents and the police, but without wishing to repeat myself, the police are the experts here and what needs to be done to reduce crime and disorder, and they haven't raised a representation. They've met us. It's not as though they've missed the application. We've discussed it with them at length. They've met us and not raised an objection. It's not like they don't raise objections to applications, because we've heard today how they've opposed other applications that have come before you recently. I think my only other comments on the supplemental evidence I received this morning was to do with clarification, and that's the suggestions in the Shield report about the timing of the smoking area. Now, to be clear, Mr. Gare suggested with the current closing times, the smoking area, and this is different from people going outside the venue to another venue and coming back in. He thought with the current times, the smoking area should close at 11:30, and if extended hours are granted, it should close at 12:30. We think that's sensible, and we suggest for a condition. What we aren't saying, to be clear, is that if extended hours are granted, we should have the smoking area closing at 11:30. So it would then mean somebody who does want to smoke has an hour and a half potentially without being able to go out for a cigarette, which we think is unreasonable. In terms of the other representations made today, I think there's concern that this has been a floodgates or have a domino effect. Chair, you've heard this again by lots of applicants, but it has to be said for record, and you'll know it, every application is determined on its own merits. If an application comes to you before in a month's time, you look at it, you start from scratch, you look at the submissions, the conditions, the objections, statutory authorities, the policy, and you and your colleagues will decide whether to grant it or not. If this application is granted sort, it doesn't mean that every application coming after will be granted, absolutely far from it. In terms of the written representations, I think this is at page 59. I can just refer to my comments there. At paragraph 7, and I wasn't trying to go above and beyond here, I was just trying to state facts. We haven't gotten examples of our specific patrons causing a nuisance. I appreciate that you're not going out asking everybody who's causing a nuisance where they're from. We have agreed conditions with the statutory authorities, and they are required to make a representation if they believe the application doesn't pull the licensing objectives. They haven't. We have got a robust dispersal policy that's appended. And in terms of the residential objectors, they do not live cheek by jowl to the premises in question, which is often the case. Yeah, perhaps I can just wrap up by simply saying that if this application is granted, we believe that our existing clientele who want to stay out later will stay with us in a well-run venue with robust conditions, with an excellent door team, rather than walking the streets migrating to other later bars in the area, which perhaps don't have such robust procedures in place. What you won't see, though, is the opposite. What you won't see has been suggested coming from other bars, such as the Redback, coming to our premises for a late licensed drink, because we've got that 12:30 last entry time. It's not just the smoking area being closed. We've suggested by way of condition, and just to be clear for residents, conditions are important. If they're breached, it's automatically a criminal offence that can attract a limited fine up to 6 months imprisonment. We suggested a last entry time of 12:30 to stop us being the last pub on the circuit, or the last bar where you can get a drink. We've worked in lockstep with the statutory authorities. The police are happy from a crime perspective. Environmental health are happy from a public nuisance perspective. And the licensing authority happy from a policy perspective is they haven't raised a rep. All we ask, Chair, is the ability to be able to compete with our rivals on a level playing field. And with this in mind, I'll leave you with one final quote. And Chair, it's a quote you'll recognise because it's your own policy. It's policy number 12. And that is, the licensing authority is committed to supporting well-run licensed premises and will ensure that they are not unreasonably limited in running their businesses by the requirements of a licensing regime. We welcome this policy. We say there's no causal link between potentially extending hours for Simmons bars and the street drinking and drug taking outside the Redback, and therefore I urge you to grant the application as sought. Chair, happy to answer any questions you might have. I'll just quickly check my clients haven't got anything burning to say. I can't see anything on the WhatsApp, so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCann. Well said. Can I now ask, committee members to ask questions to any party about application and issues that they have been raised at the hearing? Can I ask my colleagues to ask questions? Councillors?
Pardon me. I have a couple of very, very brief questions, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Alexander would like to go first or if I should get them out of the way now. Councillor?
I'd be happy to go first.
Please do. Please do.
Okay, I have to say, sort of listening to all the sides of this, I kind of agree with all of them. And you know, I'm a third generation local, and I can assure you, I've been in this bar, and I've also been in the pub in the church. I've also been in the Redback and all the other pubs. And to be quite honest, I like praying and pubbing. You know, so let's just get some clarity over some things. The comparisons have been made between Simmons and the Redback. Who's actually been in the Redback, apart from me? Okay, so they're quite different premises, and I think it's quite reasonable for an application based upon the hours to to mirror that. However, the door staff and the management at the Redback is at a much higher level, in my view, than it is at Simmons. Simmons has only got 2 door guys who generally sit outside. I know that because I walk by it every evening, and they'll be keeping an eye on the people outside. And I've never had any problems from the people outside from Simmons, but they do congregate in a larger crowd, and I suspect that I'm not easily worried, and I know quite a few of the faces because they I think quite a few of the customers in Simmons come from the local estates, so I don't have a problem with that. But it's unacceptable to block the pavement so that women and families and more vulnerable people can't easily walk by without, you know, because they're worried a bit because, you know, young people can be exuberant. So anyway, I'm supposed to be asking questions rather than making speeches. So let's just come to the thing. Okay. Can you just? I don't know whether it's Neil or Kelsey who's the best person to answer this. In terms of the number of security you've got at your bar, how well do you think that compares with the Redback?
So Chair, just to clarify, we've got 3 security, but I know that Kelsey and Nick, they speak to their security teams every day. So perhaps, Kelsey, Nick, could you give a bit more of a flavour about the security team you have in place, their number and their roles and responsibilities? So with that, I appreciate I'm sort of fleshing out your question a bit more. But
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we have security on. We have conditions on our license about security as well. So we run with 3 security. 2 of them have body cams. Our head doorman's actually been there since we took the venue over, so he's been there 8 years now. They're very experienced in the area, and we have a lot of policy and process around dress codes, how people are allowed to enter. We keep very, very good records of anybody who's ever been any problems in our venue. And yeah, I mean, our security team have never really been even questioned when we've spoken to police licensing, or so we've never had any issues with them. They're very good and they're very reactive. I would just sort of comment to say that when I've been in there before, and I've been in quite a few times, so it's not an every occasion thing, but the security guys have been out the front, sort of socially chit-chatting with the people who are out the front, and there's nobody towards the back of the place, and that kind of concerns me a little bit, because it's going to be a lot more, because as you quite rightly said earlier, people pile out of Simmons and they head off to the King's Arms or whatever it calls itself, and the Redback, because they're open later. And I've done the same myself, you know, because you're closing, so you're going to retain those people. And I'm not really sure in your application about the
what's going on inside rather than the outside. I think is well controlled over who comes in and comes out and your dress codes and the other stuff, but it's what goes on inside, because I don't think the people on the front have got any chance of getting to the back in any reasonable amount of time.
Yes, so Councillor, we have one door security SIA permanently inside. So we do have somebody permanently actually inside the venue as opposed on the door.
Yeah. And in turn, I'm just going to ask some questions to the local residents now. I've only been a councillor since May, so I am, but I've been a resident a lot longer, and I have walked by and been hit by the fug of marijuana being smoked outside the place. And I can't say that I don't know whose responsibility that is. That's not recent, and it may well be that you've dealt with the problem or the individual no longer frequents your premises. But in fairness, that's the impression that comes over to. Now, John, before I ask you a question and sort of sound as if I'm completely on your side, which is not the intention, I live close by. And I know about all the pavement pizzas we get from people vomiting and people urinating, people sitting in my front garden defecating, but I can't tie any of those in with Simmons itself. So it kind of seems unfair that we aim the gun at Simmons for what is a problem of younger people. Some of them haven't even been at Fulham Broadway. They've come all the way from Chelsea and they're on their way home and they're absolutely, paralytic. And we can't blame the Fulham Broadway for all of these things. And certainly not, we can't single out Simmons for those things. So can you see that point? And would you like to speak to that point, John?
Yes, thank you. But it doesn't follow that we can't have rules that we apply evenly to at least begin to minimise the effect and the risks. I'm, clearly Simmons, well-run organisation. I understand understand what goes on within its premises. We can't all live in a community and abnegate responsibility. That would allow every individual bar on the North End Road to go, once they've left my premises, it's not up to me. I've got no responsibility for that. We can't be blind to the consequences. The facts are the facts. These things happen. What we're worried about, the domino effect, the knock-on effect, the floodgates, is the overall position, the overall environment that our families and our children live in, when it is patently clear that criminal activity and antisocial behaviour goes hand in hand with longer drinking hours, more people out, attracting more people in an area. The key point for me, in an area which is, as you go up the North End Road, solidly 100% residential.
Okay, thank you, John. It's more the point thing. And is it Father Chris or Reverend or? Sorry, I'm not one of you. I've been in your establishment, but I'm not one of your flock. The town centre idea. St John's Church has, it is part of our local community. If you're anywhere on the North End Road, and indeed, because it was part of the Fulham Broadway Town Centre in the past, we've supported the church with hundreds of thousands of pounds of things for railings and for other projects for the church, specifically because it was part of the town centre and wasn't taken into being part of North End Road. So it kind of, I see what you're saying about it not being in the main part of the town centre, but in the kind of definitions we've had over the years, it has fallen in. And all this is before your incumbency. So please don't. I'm not. If I've accidentally applied a double standard, I'm not saying that at all. It's just the. It is a loose one, and I can see it is part of North End Road, but it's right at the end of North End Road, where North End Road butts into Fulham Broadway in the town centre. So it's kind of a little bit unfair to say that Simmons or even the other couple of premises around there are not really the town centre. I'd agree they're not the main town centre. Would you like to speak to that, Chris? Sorry, is it Father?
Yeah, Chris is fine. I'm not speaking on behalf of the church. I'm speaking on behalf of local residents. The position of the church is not exactly relevant. What is relevant here is that whatever the technical definitions, the Simmons Bar is surrounded, literally surrounded on all sides by residential areas. Whatever the technical definition, and I think town centre applies to Fulham Broadway, not to the North End Road, and Jordan Place and all the rest of it, they're all North End Road. And there are hundreds of people living adjacent to Simmons Bar. Irrelevant to where I live, 4 roads up, where John lives, 3 roads up, you know, people are living round there, and that's the issue. It's not, nobody's saying that Simmons Bar is inappropriate or not a very well run thing. The reality is they are surrounded by residents, which makes it a residential area, whatever the technical definition.
Thank you, Chris. Obviously, you'll be aware of the other pub, which I don't particularly want to name, that's close by on the North End Road as you proceed north, a few doors up from Simmons. And that's quite a well-run pub too, but they've had problems with noise at the back in their garden area, and some of their patrons have certainly, I wouldn't say that they've urinated or they've thrown up somewhere, but I've seen some of them coming out of that place, you know, pretty much the worse for wear in that sense. So I'm just bothered in fairness and to Simmons as to whether it's right to deal with this in this way. And going back to what was said by John with these things, it sounds corny, and I would have slung it back in your face before I was a councillor, but these things don't seem to get reported to the police and to the local authority, the incidences of vomits and that. Therefore, the problem with the authorities responsible for dealing with it isn't dealt with. And I'm as guilty as the rest of the people for not reporting things that I've seen, although as a councillor I'm trying to do better.
I think the issue here is that Mr. McCann said about, you know, the licensing authority will consider each particular case on its merits. What didn't get included in that statement was having regard in particular to the following matters: whether the licensed activities are likely to have an adverse impact, especially on local residents. Now, that's the bigger area. It's the bigger concept that the licensing authority are duty bound to look at. It's not just the individual premises. It's actually the global impact on local residents, the cumulative impact. If you go to point 5.4, oh bother, I can't find it now. I wrote it down somewhere. The cumulative impact of the type and density of licensed premises on the local residents. There are local residents. This is going to have a cumulative impact. It's already adverse. Add more hours to any licensed premises, however good they are, is going to have an impact, because they can't, we're not expecting, they can't control their customers when they're out on the street and they've gone down Walham Grove or Dawes Road or Racton Road or any of the others. They can't control them. The licensing authority is asked to look at the cumulative impact of this application. This application will increase the impact, whether we like it or not. It's not a reflection on them, it's a reflection on the situation that we have to deal with at the moment, and it does have an impact. You know, watching toddlers watching parents trying to guide toddlers around sick on the pavement, it's an impact, and that's a negative impact on our children. Now,
okay,
yep.
I'm not disputing that. Thank you very much. No further questions for now, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dominic, have you got questions, please?
Yes, Chair. They're really two very, very brief questions, actually. Really just for clarification, just to make sure I've understood everything correctly. Thank you, firstly, to everybody who's spoken. As usual, you've answered most of the questions that I had before we started. I would have had a lot more had you not been so clear in what you've said. My first question actually is to licensing. It's really just a point of clarification in the way something is represented in the report. So I don't know whether Alicia, if you can answer this, or Mr. Adrian can answer it. But in the temporary event notices, there is the list of the 13 temporary event notices that have been submitted in the past 12 months. And it says on the table, the heading is, there's two headings, start date and end date. I just wanted to know how the start date and the end dates relate to the period that is actually covered by the temporary event notices, because, for example, the second temporary event notice that is in the table, this is page 7 of the report, it says start date the 10th of December 2021, end date the 12th of December 2021. In the detail, it says that the period covered is the 10th of November to the 12th of November, which obviously is not within the period of the 10th of December to the 12th of December. Similar also for the second one. I could go on the, where are we now? Yeah, the 4th and the 5th ones, they're outside that period. Is this just a typographical error, or have I misunderstood what the start date and the end date actually refer to?
No, I believe so, Chair. Sorry, that's an error.
Okay.
They will be the dates more than likely in the comments.
Okay.
It won't conflict.
That's fine. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ensure that I wasn't going mad. So I appreciate that clarification. In which case, just a question to the applicant. I've noticed that I think there are 11 Sundays and in fact 1 or 2 Mondays that you've applied for in those temporary event notices. And I was just wondering why it was that you picked Thursday to Saturday as your hours of extended licensing, where the days where you appear to be doing the longer business hours are actually Friday to Sunday. And so I guess my follow-up question, if I just ask that before we do that, does this mean that you're actually, instead of doing temporary event notices from Fridays to Sundays now, you're just going to be tacking Sundays on top of whatever license we may or may not grant today?
Chair, perhaps I could answer this. So the days we're applying for, and Kelsey, please butt in if I get confused with this, is to extend it so it goes into Thursday night and Friday morning, Friday night into Saturday mornings, Saturday mornings into Sunday mornings. That's how it works. If this application is granted, obviously we have the benefit of later hours. Every premises has a statutory right to apply for a temporary event notice. Whether they choose to do so will be a matter for them, and also a matter for environmental health of the police, who can raise a counter notice to any application for a 10. So what I can't say, Councillor, at this stage, is we'll never apply for temporary event notices, because that's bettering a statutory right. But obviously, if additional hours are granted, the commercial need to apply for temporary event notices is reduced. Does that answer your question, Chair?
It does, yes.
Thank you. I've elevated you as Chair, Vice Chair.
I assumed you were answering the. Yeah. No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. I don't actually think I kind of reserve my right to get back in at the end if you have any questions, Chair. If Councillor Alexander does, but I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I know, Mr. McCann, you mentioned you have you had a meeting with the licensing authority like the Met, but you know, I do believe you had, but it would have been nice to have their input as well on this matter to tell us exactly. You know, we are only hearing from you. We haven't heard from them exactly what they said. That would equally help us in determining for our residents equally to know that at the place you have spoken to them. I'm only taking your word that you've spoken to them, but there's no evidence that's from you that this is what they said about the hours. So how, yeah, could you?
So Chair, the minutes of a meeting are within your committee report of the meeting we had with the police, the licensing authority, and also the noise team. What we can't do is we can't ask the police, the statutory or the other statutory authorities such as environmental health or licensing to make a representation. It's up to them to actually do it, and generally they only put in written representations if they are against an application rather than for it. You sometimes get businesses putting in positive representations, but I've never seen, I don't think you necessarily can put in a representation that's positive from a statutory authority. So they are obliged to put in representations if they have concerns about the applications. And the fact they haven't is an indication that they're not concerned that this application is granted sort. But Chair, it is the notes of that meeting are actually in the committee report. Maybe somebody can tell me what page of, I don't know off the top of my head, but.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, you know, following the licensing law, how will the premises disperse all at the end of the day? How will they be able to disperse all those people that come to the bar? How will they be able, without them causing noise to the residents, because of the residents are saying they can hear them, you know, in the streets. So how do you manage that?
Chair, if I can refer you to page 70 of the committee report, this is the dispersal policy we've actually prepared. So you don't have to take it from the word of Kelsey, who prepares it and organises it. We've actually got a written policy already in place.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions from my colleagues. Do you have any more questions, councillors?
Yes, if I may, Chair. Can I ask David a couple of questions? David, I understand you're a former police officer, and you've done some assessments of the premises and looked at some of the issues. But as a copper, who's there really to look after residents more than anybody else, can you hear the concern of the local community and very, very responsible local people who are concerned about the impact of this? And is there anything you can suggest that you've seen in your experience that could soften the impact, or will it be just a hard and fast choice for us?
Thank you, Councillor. As Niall said earlier, we're sort of considered experts in this field simply through our experience when we're in the police, probably closing premises down on those occasions. So I've learned a lot of the sort of, from a policing perspective, exactly what it takes to run a good venue. And as Niall quite rightly says, some of our reports, I can assure you, we are extremely independent. Otherwise, we wouldn't last 2 minutes doing what we do. Never see the light of day because we are critical of venues and they withdraw applications. So we can only go on what we see and experience from the meeting the licensee, meeting the DPS on the night, looking at the venue, looking at the local community and the neighbourhood, if you like. We do what we call an environmental visual audit. So we look at the place, look at the throughput of sort of pedestrian throughput, traffic, you know, how many other licensed venues there are, and try to get a feel of that place. So all I can say is that in my experience, and that we've done literally dozens and dozens of these over the last 8 or 9 years, for venues all across the southeast of England is that this venue in particular is a well-run venue that has good policies in place and a commitment to support the licensing objectives. And those are the main criteria for us, is if they're demonstrating and evidenced the fact that they're supporting a licensing objective, and that's reducing crime and assault, reducing nuisance, obviously the security and safety of the venue and protecting young people from harm, then those are the things they should be doing, and those are the things we're looking at. All I can say is that on the night we visited, it was actually quite right. It was just the one night. It was a Friday night. The venue was extremely well run, and dispersal actually, councillor, was very gradual through the night, and it wasn't this big disgorge of people coming out at the terminal hour. And that's how most licensed premises are, apart from nightclubs, which are different, where everyone piles out about 3 a.m. So all I can say is, from our experience, so we're satisfied that actually all the policies and commitments that they've made are evidenced, and they were in place when we visited the venue.
Okay, David, thank you very much. And one final question, Chair, and maybe I could ask John to just assist me with my thinking, because we've got very credible local residents with very sincere concerns. We've heard from two experts in the field, Neil and David, about premises, and then the applicant, who just wants a level playing field with the other ones. It makes it a hard, it's a very balanced decision on this for me, and I just want you to sort of. I'm surprised I don't know you, because we're almost neighbours, but is there anything further you can add that you think the premises could do, even if you don't agree with the concept, that one, is there something better that the premises could do to alleviate some of the problems, or two, is there anything you can just sort of say that would definitively, in my mind, say that this application would cause a cumulative problem? And so you don't have to speak in legal terms or whatever else. I'm just speak as you find, but you need to turn your microphone on.
So, okay, was that directed to me? Sorry.
Sorry, no, it was to John. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Paul. I just momentarily couldn't reactivate my mic. So what would I consider? Well, this is fundamentally about hours. Every 15-30 minutes counts for residents. If you can shorten the hours after midnight, I believe that would make a fundamental difference. 5.3b of the policy says you have to consider the cumulative impact of the adjacent residential area. That's all we're asking the committee to do. I think it would have an impact if they reverted to David's condition at 6.3 on page 7 of his report, whereby they assisted what sounds like very good dispersal practices already, but can they be improved by not allowing re-entry after a certain time? If the committee's minded with 12:30, that seems to have dropped off from the condition that's agreed. I fully take the point. These are hard times, not just for this business, for loads of businesses and loads of individuals who are working longer for less money and finding it very hard. The representative for Simmons is absolutely right to make that point, but it needs to be made in balance, because it's only one factor. It doesn't have priority over other factors, and indeed, the authority he cites clearly says you have to take it. You have to look at the impact of the loads of those people. He said, we're not cheek by jowl. Well, you're right. I don't live above the premises. I'll put my hand up, but I live with the consequences of it, as Paul, that you've very fairly represented. So I do appreciate that. So I would say any half hour in favour closer to midnight is a big difference. Thinking and improving the dispersal, which will build, I recognise, on a good dispersal policy. any of that will begin to find a balance through the different competing interests.
John, thank you very much, and thank you to Chris as well for essentially helping us and giving us a perspective on how local residents feel. Chair, unless I've sort of biased by not asking somebody a question, I'll stop at that point, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. In that case, we have to go on summing up. So please, can the parties sum up 3 minutes in the following order? The licensing officer, Elisha Collins, could you sum up in 3 minutes? Have you got something to say?
Yeah, just one point, please, Chair. That the pre-application report is on pages 61 to 67, which confirms all the comments made by everybody that was consulted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the objectors, can I ask Chris Rankin to speak? I'll give you 6 minutes to speak.
I'll see if I can fill it. I think the key thing here is local residents are not disputing that Simmons Bar run a tight ship. And the reality is, if they didn't run a tight ship and if there were issues, the application probably wouldn't have even got this far. The issue is in 5.3a, 5.3b, it's about the duty of care for local residents and those who live adjacent. And adjacent is not cheek by jowl, adjacent is the streets around, and that's very clear. As soon as we start to increase hours, we're going to have an impact. There is already a negative impact. This is likely to increase that, and that's what we're asking you to do. We don't have legal representation. We are simply local residents saying, guys, please, this is a residential area, and we need to look after local residents as is in the policy. That's it.
That's 2 minutes. In that case, we have John Scolding. John, can I ask you to sum up in 3 minutes, John?
Yeah, absolutely. As I just said, I mean, this is fundamentally about hours, and it seems to me that it's incredibly difficult to deliver a good night's sleep for all the children on all the residential roads in an area that is solidly adjoining and adjacent to the North End Road. Yes, the representative rightly said that it does not logically follow that if you grant part of this application, then all the other applications will get it. But it's very difficult when they turn up and say, well, on the basis of economic grounds, you've allowed Bar A to run till 1 o'clock or whenever. Why will you then not allow me? I think it's fundamentally the domino effect is a real issue here. It can't be in my submission that the economic situation allows you to deprive people of sleep. I just fundamentally do not believe that that is the case, and particularly so of children. Old lags like me, it's maybe not an issue, but for children, I think it is fundamentally important. And I think you do, as Chris said, have to look at the cumulative position, and you do have to consider the adjacent residential area. And I'm grateful for the views of councillors, which are balancing that and are trying to do it. And as I say, every 30 minutes counts. Anything you can do to strike a balance, which finds, let's say, a middle ground, that would be appreciated, though we would ask you to reject the extension of hours.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. Now, can I ask Nick, his solicitor, to sum up? I'll give them 6 minutes, being that people have spoken for 3 minutes each.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I begin by saying we're not denying that there are problems of antisocial behaviour in the Fulham area. That is clear and it's been articulated very well by the 2 local residents appearing today. However, we're also saying that there's no evidential link to what is going on with the operation of Simmons and the potential to extend the hours of Simmons. Where there is evidence, it is generally presented by the police and environmental health, who frequently make representations objecting to the grant of extended hours, and they haven't done so here. Also, you look at the policy. It's a very detailed policy you have. We are in the town centre, which has suggested hours of much later on a Friday and Saturday, but we haven't sought to go to the full extent of those suggested hours. We've tried to be balanced in our approach. We haven't got residents above us. We haven't got residents immediately to our side. It is in a situation with many licensed premises where we have immediate neighbours. We don't have those. We suggest proffered robust conditions, which will balance out any extension of hours should it be granted. I've been asked to say that if the application is granted, we'd be happy to have a condition saying that we'll have 3 SIA if we're open past 12 o'clock. We do that anyway, but the condition currently only says 2. And the avoidance of doubt, the conditions as proffered are that if this application is granted as sought, we'll have a last entry re-entry time of 12:30, and the smoking area will be closed to patrons at 12:30. Chair, it's been a long evening. I think we've gone through all the issues. Thank you very much for all your questions, you and your colleagues, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, the committee will now retire and take its decision in a separate room. An adjournment tile will be displayed during the deliberation. So we will come back. Now we have to leave and deliberate. So can I ask the councillors now to leave the meeting and come to the deliberation room?
This is good.
Hello? Is everybody in? Hello?
Yes, the councillors are there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back to everyone. And we have reached our decision. The committee has considered an application to vary the premises license and replaced and removed some conditions at Appendix 2 of the existing licensing under the Licensing Act 2003. The application. In summary, the committee has decided, after taking into account all of the individual circumstances of this case and the promotion of 4 licensing objectives, to 1, grant the application in parts as follows: performance of live music indoors only, such Sunday to Thursday, 6 to 12, Friday to Saturday, 6 to 1 o'clock. Performance of recorded music indoors only, Sunday to Thursday, 10 o'clock to 12, Friday to Saturday, 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Performance of anything of similar description of live music, recorded music, or performance of dance indoor only, Sunday to Thursday, 10 to 12, Friday to Saturday, 10 to 1. Sale of alcohol on the premises, Sunday to Thursday, 11 to 23:45 in the evening. Friday to Saturday, 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock. The opening hours of the premises, Sunday to Thursday, 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Friday to Saturday, 8 o'clock to 1:30. 2, modified the following conditions as set out below. Condition 32, amended to minimize of 3 SLA licensed door supervisors shall be on duty at the premises from 20 hours on Friday and Saturday. Added the following conditions: a responsible member of the staff shall organize and accommodate meetings to discuss the operation of the premises with the residents at least 2 times per calendar year. The meeting shall be advertised at 14 days before its due date by the letter to residents and the Residents Association in the locality, as well as to the licensing authority. 3, the licensing is subject to any mandatory condition. 4, the license is subject to conditions agreed by the applicant as amended by the committee. 5, the license is subject to condition imposed by the committee. This license becomes operational with immediate effect. If problems are experienced, then an application for a review of the premises license can be made. A copy of this committee's full decision, including its reason and full text of the condition added to the licensing, will be sent to the parties forthwith. If the applicant is unhappy with the decision, they are entitled to appeal to the magistrate court within 21 days from the date of notification of the full licensing. I would like to thank everyone for attending or watching tonight's meeting. A summary decision will be published on our website tomorrow. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you.